Morning, everyone. So this is what we say opening session of the Supergen Energy Storage Networks ECR and EDI seminar. So I welcome you all here. As a part of this activity, we also welcome our colleagues who are joining from through online platform and everyone out here. For your information, we are going to record this session and let's start. Just give me a second. Okay, so agenda for today, I hope you had got chance to network with some of our colleagues here. I'm giving you a brief outline of our today's session. We have first speaker, Dr. Edward Barber, who is going to talk us through career development, his perspective on that. We also have Dr. Angeliki Lokatu with us, who is also going to share her perspectives about career development. Then we will be having some question answer time to have a discussion around your questions about the career development, and we will be closing by 12. Then we have the lunch between 12 to 1:30 here outside. So just to give you an introduction about Supergen Energy Storage Network Plus, it is headed by Professor Yulong Ding from University of Birmingham. We have other 19 academics from 12 different institutions here, and it is funded by EPSRC. There are different activities under this project, which is through what we can say International Energy Storage Alliance for international projects, as well as there are other 34 different partners, project partners involved with this project. As we are energy storage network, we consider different type of energy storage technologies, including electrochemical, electrical, thermal, mechanical, chemical, and it is integration of these different energy storage in energy networks, as well as energy and society, environmental, social, economical, and policy aspects of it, and artificial intelligence, as well as big data. So basically the vision of Supergen Energy Storage Network is to connect and serve stakeholders across energy community and advancing and championing UK energy storage research and deployment. So especially for early career researchers, there are different activities which have dedicated funding available for it. It is to support research activities, especially for early career researchers. There are also opportunities to submit papers to IIT Smart Grid Journal. There are networking opportunities through dedicated events. So throughout the year, we have different events, be those specifically for technological aspects or also career development aspects. This year we had what you can say master class on life cycle assessment, and also some other career development talks through these ECR events. Also, ECRs are supported through some flexible funding, so you can just visit the website and keep looking on different funding opportunities, especially for early career researchers. We have Early Career Researcher Committee, and I will just introduce them in next slide. And we also have Supergen cross-hub webinar series. So we have different Supergens like one ours is energy storage, but there are Supergen energy networks and other bioenergy related and other Supergen. So there are cross-hub webinar series as well. So this is Early Career Researchers Committee, and Janine is here. And also I thank all my fellow committee members for organizing this event. And with this short introduction, maybe I invite Dr. Edward for giving his insights on career development. Welcome, Edward.
I should probably stand here so that I'm in the online camera. So do I just hit this? Oops, not useful yet. Let's try that. Okay, so welcome to my talk. It's entitled Insights for Your First Academic Posts and Funding Applications. As just said, this is part of the Supergen Energy Storage Network Plus Early Career Researcher Initiative. My name's Dr. Ed Barber. I'm a lecturer in energy systems at Loughborough University. In my talk, I'm going to do pretty much what the title says. I'm going to go through take a chronological approach to academic career progression from PhD student through until early career lecturer. And I'm going to give you a couple of tips or a number of tips that I found helpful along the way, as well as things that maybe I wish I'd known. So first off, a little bit about me. I'm a lecturer in energy systems at Loughborough, as I said. I've been in the post since 2019. I grew up in Belfast, so oh, I just noticed this on the side. Can I get rid of that? That's great, thanks. So I grew up in Belfast. I then did 4 years of undergraduate in physics at Oxford. I then did a PhD in mechanical engineering at the University of Edinburgh, followed by a year of postdoc at the Birmingham Center for Energy Storage. I then moved to the US and worked in the Civil and Environmental Engineering Department at MIT for a few years before I started as a lecturer at Loughborough University in 2019. A little bit on my role. So my role as a lecturer is primarily in research and teaching. My research interests are in thermomechanical energy storage technologies and data-driven energy systems. Why am I interested in both of these? Well, thermomechanical energy storage systems have high potential to maybe be the low-cost, large-scale energy storage that we are likely to need in a future with a massive reliance on weather-dependent renewables. The left-hand image here shows an image from one of our recent papers on compressed air energy storage. So here we're looking at compressed air energy storage and trying to understand what it'll take to become a viable large-scale energy storage option. Go and look at the paper. I'm also interested in data analysis. This is an opportunity to understand what the value in all the data that we get from the energy system and the peripheral data is. So in this example here, we've used mobile phone data to try and understand what building occupancy might look like. Why might you want to do that? Well, of course, the energy in a building is driven by its occupants. So if you want to get a clear picture of what the impact of, say, widespread retrofits of insulation are, you need to know when people are in the buildings. And this model has helped us get some higher confidence in our city scale energy modeling. I also teach. I teach engineering, thermodynamics, and renewable energy systems to undergrads, and I teach on the master's course at Loughborough University. in renewable energy systems and technology. And I teach on the energy storage and data analytics for smart energy systems modules. So that's a little bit about me. Onto the talk. I think before we go through the progression, it's useful to just reflect on why you might want to be an academic in the first place. You guys are probably in the position where you're deciding whether this is a good option or not. I like being an academic for a number of reasons. So one, I can work on problems which I think are important. I can choose the problems to tackle, which I believe are of most societal importance. You have freedom and flexibility. So that's the freedom to decide what your daily schedule looks like, but also you're flexible to evolve your research direction. So if you come across a particular aspect of research that you think is very promising, then you can steer your research towards that. I think it's gratifying. I think that we as academics are largely valued members of the community and people value our advice. I think that this is a role that we should take very seriously, especially in this age of misinformation that we live in. You have a balance of research and teaching. It's not necessarily always the right balance for you on a given day, but you get to do both. And that's, I find that very rewarding because, okay, sure, I dream of impact with my research, but ultimately, I also get quite a lot of impact from influencing thousands of graduate engineers who are going to go out and try and solve the world's problems. You can relocate pretty easy as an academic. So I've moved a lot during my career. It's not necessarily something that you want to do, but there are universities all over the world. So there are options there for you and conferences happen all over. So if you like traveling, you can do that. You're probably not going to do it for the pay. Despite what you might hear, we do get paid pretty well. I think it's better than the median salary in the UK, that's for sure. But given the amount of work you put in, if you're after just remuneration, you can maybe get it more elsewhere. What does the career path for an academic look like? Well, starting on the left, you might start out as a PhD student. If you decide you want to go into industry, then maybe you can do that, and maybe there are more rewards. But if you're going down the academic career path, you're probably going to go on to be a postdoc. From the postdoc, you might decide you just want to do research, and then you might opt to be a research scientist within a university, or you might decide that you want to be a lecturer. Lecturer is also often called assistant professor. Those terms are generally interchangeable. Then from a lecturing position, you can get promoted, you can become a senior lecturer, you can become a reader, and then maybe a professor. And then maybe if you really make it, you can become vice chancellor. And we all know that, okay, there is a way to make money in academia, it's to be the vice chancellor. Okay, so let's say you're a PhD student and you want to go about getting a postdoc. I think that, as Sean Bean puts here, it's not quite as simple as simply choosing where you're going to postdoc. There are a lot of things to consider. Number one is that you're probably going to want to go somewhere that is good for what you do. And number two is you have to follow the money. So you need to get paid, and somebody then needs to have funding to employ you as a postdoc on a project. How might you find relevant postdoc positions? Well, I think using your PhD advisor and their network is a really good way. This might allow you to get ahead of the game in terms of your advisor might know that someone's about to get funding or has got it and hasn't advertised a postdoc yet. And then you can make that informal contact and start to use that link. As an academic, I get a lot of out of the blue emails, speculative emails, and most of the time, I'm afraid to say, I don't really even read them. It's just, I don't have the time to do that, and there's so many of them. So I would say that, you know, you can pour your heart and soul into a speculative email, but be aware that they rarely work. Postdocs quite often have to move. As I said, you know, there might be postdoc opportunities in different locations, and you have to follow where the jobs are. So that's sometimes a pro and that's sometimes a con. When you come across that job application, check the requirements. So if you can't make the case that you meet the person specification, you're not going to be able to sell it to the PI. Always, always, always tailor your application. This is something that I've come to realize as I sit on hiring committees to realize the importance of it. When if I'm looking for a postdoc, I'm looking for someone who can tell me why they can reliably do the job that's advertised. And if you're not talking about the job that's advertised, that's not a good start. Keep it simple. The purpose of your application is probably to get an interview. Bear in mind that you've probably done 3 or 4 years of PhD research. It took you that long because it's complicated. So don't go all in on the technical details too early. Put yourself in the person who's hiring you, put yourself in their shoes. So what they want is someone who can reliably do the job. Probably they've spent an awful lot of time and energy trying to win the funding in the first place, and then they're not actually going to be the one who does the research. So they want someone who can take reliable ownership of that project. If you have your own funding or you're looking for funding, then look for compatibility with expertise. Okay, so you've got that postdoc job. What do you do? Well, now this is your chance to prepare for to be a lecturer or to build your CV up to get to the point where you can be competitive on lecturing applications. You've been hired to do a research project, and you've probably been hired to take ownership of that. Do those things. If you look at the people that you're likely to interact with, you're not a clueless undergrad. You've gone through a whole 3 or 4 years of training as a PhD student or more. You're being hired as the expert. So bear that in mind and take ownership of the project. If you are considering a career in academia, then you need to save up. You need to put money in the bank, and that academic currency is papers, really. So start thinking about those papers, try and get them written. Your PI is going to be pleased. Those are outputs that we can put against the grant. It's a good time, I think, being a postdoc to write a review paper, because you don't have to write a thesis. You can do the review. The review will give you a very good overview of what's going on in the field, and you'll probably also get ideas from that review. Write those down because they'll come in handy later. I also would recommend trying to apply for funding while you're a postdoc. This could be in the form of fellowships, early career grants, like those available through the Supergen Network Plus, and small pots of money and travel grants. This is really useful for your CV, but it also gives you an idea of what applying for money is like, because if you find that you hate that, then maybe a lecturing job isn't for you. What else does a postdoc do? Well, what else do they do that might not be on the job specification? So when you go for a lecturing application, you want to make sure that there's some difference between you and what your previous advisor has done. So if you're applying for funding and you do exactly the same thing as your PhD advisor or your postdoc advisor, but you just have a less well-equipped lab and a smaller track record, that's not a good way to get the funding. So you need to decide what your unique selling point is, and that's what's going to make you different from everyone else out there. As a postdoc, I think it's really important to work smart. So to prioritize, if you want to be a lecturer, there's some boxes that you have to tick. If you haven't had any teaching experience, now is a good time to get some, because again, it'll tell you whether or not you like it. On the other hand, if you have had teaching experience and you're missing those high impact papers, then politely decline the teaching opportunities and work on getting those papers. You can also help your advisor with research grants as well as the ones that you're applying for. So here, you're not going to get the credit for this. You might go on to the proposal as a researcher co-I, but even if you don't and you help with that application, that's really valuable experience going forward. Trust me, we as PIs need help with our applications, but also when you then go to interview and they ask you, what is your experience of applying for funding? You can tell them. And okay, your name's not on the grant, but they are aware that as a postdoc, you couldn't be the PI. So that's not going to count against you. If you haven't ever supervised projects, then you can work with project students and take advantage of the postdoc networks and initiatives that are out there. So now you're coming to that lecturing job application. Typically, it's going to consist of an application form, a CV, a cover letter, and then some kind of statement. It might be a personal statement. It might be split up into different components. What you're wanting to do here is stand out, but also tick the boxes. And you do that with different parts of your application. So your CV is about ticking the boxes, whereas your statement is your chance to stand out. The statements are all about selling a coherent and convincing vision about what your future research will look like, why in 5 to 10 years you're going to be the expert in this area. Again, as with the postdoc jobs, tailor your application. So look at what they want, look at who else is going to be in the department that you might be working in for a long time, and say what you bring to it and why you fit in. Also, lecturer is a slightly misleading job title, especially in terms of getting the job. And it's much more, the emphasis is typically much more on your research. So even though you're applying to be a lecturer, if you spend the whole time talking about why you'll be a good lecturer, you're unlikely to get that interview. Welcome to the reality of academia. So if you apply for lecturing jobs, the chances are you're going to get rejected. So this was a paper from 2020 looking at a number of different UK and US institutions. And there's, for every one opening, they were finding there was more than 200 applications. So the probability is that you're going to experience some rejection, and that's probably an ongoing, a central theme in your academic career as you go forward. Most people don't get interviews. Don't take it personally. There are many reasons why you might not have got that interview. Just refine your application as you progress through your postdoc and think about what you can learn. So it's really frustrating when you spend ages and ages writing an application and then you apply for a job and you don't get any feedback. And quite often you try then to get feedback from that, but ask yourself, is it worth it? And a lot of the time it just isn't, is the unfortunate answer. Where it is very much worth asking for feedback is if you've had informal contact with someone in the department already, and if you have that person that you can reach out and ask, okay, why didn't I make the cut? And they might say, well, unfortunately you didn't have enough papers, or they might say there was a preferred candidate who was very strong, who was internal. So you can get that. The bottom line is you need some luck. These applications take loads of time and they're a little bit disheartening, but you're a postdoc. Keep doing the research and keep building up your track record, because that's going to make you a stronger and stronger candidate going forward. And eventually you'll get an interview. So this is again, a little bit about the interview process. So this is taken from the same paper, which looks at those academic applications and the academic job market. And they asked the interview panels, what do you wish candidates knew more about? And these are some of the things that they came up with. So I think that I'll just highlight the big bold ones. So collegiality, your research proposal, and the chalk talk. The research proposal, what they're saying here is that it's really important to sell a convincing vision of your future research. A chalk talk, I'd not actually heard of, but I think it's US lingo for an informal chat of where you sell your research vision. And it might not be just with the interview committee, but it might be with wider members of the department. They also asked the selection committees, how do you think that the hiring process has changed while you've been involved in it? And I'm just going to highlight one here, and that is online interviews. So when you're going for that job application, make sure that you have an online forum in which you're comfortable with, and you've got a good setup. You can get away from background noise. you're unlikely to drop out, all these kind of little things that do sometimes make a difference. When you get an academic job offer, well, now the ball is in your court and it becomes a negotiation. So you need to think about, what do you need? That could be lab space, that could be people to work in the lab. Yeah, you have to weigh your needs against the department needs and decide whether or not the job is suitable for you. You probably have already decided that, but make sure you get that space allocated to you if you need it. At this point, they are not going to want to lose you. So they've spent a lot of time and effort sifting through hundreds of applications to find you. So you are the person that they want. I think there's no shame here in being American. You're going to be offered a salary and it's perfectly acceptable to negotiate on that. You should also decide when works for you. So, don't be rushed into starting unless they really need you to do that, in which case you can talk about that. I also think that it's really useful to have a mentor. I found it very useful to have a mentor in the department, someone who I can come to ask questions, and it's in their job description for me to be able to do that. Someone who'll fight my corner when I feel as though I've got too much teaching or I need protected time to do research, that kind of thing. And make sure you understand the balance of teaching and research that you're being hired to do. When you start that new job, it's easy to get overwhelmed. There is loads to do. You've got to prepare to teach, you've got to publish, you might have to do a teaching qualification, you've got to find PhD students because you need people to do the work. Be aware of what your supposed workload and workload limits are, though bear in mind that the models are quite often very, very wrong. I think one of the most important things for me and to other people who I've spoken to about this is, in order to maintain your sanity, it's good to maintain some structure in your week. So I find, for example, that after lunch, I just want to have a nap. That's a good time for me to do emails because it takes time, but I don't necessarily have to think that hard. Whereas if I'm coding or writing a paper, I'll allocate time in the morning to do that. Or if I'm trying to read a paper that I need to understand, that will be morning time, and my calendar will get blocked in order for me to do that. You might want to set aside office hours for students. That might even be a policy in the institution that you're applying for. And some people I know allocate time regularly for reading and reviewing papers. I don't tend to do this. I tend to allocate it as and when I need to, but as I said, I will block out a morning where I need to read something that's important. In all of that, it's easy to forget that you need to keep networking. So get to know those colleagues first and foremost. They are your support network. When you need someone to complain about your teaching load to, they're there and they have a sympathetic ear. Find a team in which you can work. I much prefer working as a member of a team than completely on my own. At this stage, there are probably other networking options that are going to come and present themselves to you. So a particularly good one, I think, are sitting on advisory and review panels. So that could be a review panel for a grant. And this is really useful because it allows you to understand different points of view that are important in the funding process. Thinking about funding, well, you've already got that job now, so you probably should have already done this. One of the questions that you're incredibly likely to be asked in your academic job interview is how you're going to fund your research. And you should have a general awareness of the funding landscape. Some of the most relevant, I think, for the people in this room are likely to be things like the EPSRC and their new investigator award, standard mode grants. There are a number of fellowships, Royal Academy of Engineering, EPSRC. You should be aware of these, Royal Society. Innovate UK grants are really useful where you've got a company who can take a large proportion of the workload. There are also smaller studies which might be more short-term and have a much more clearly defined end goal, like phase feasibility studies. And then if you have that direct industrial link, keep that. That's a really important one. There's not many academics have good, strong, direct industrial links for funding, and they're really useful and they really translate into research impact. So you decided you want to develop that proposal. First question is, which bit of money is going to fund your research? And make sure that you meet the requirements for that specific call. The most important thing in the research proposal, from my experience and from asking others, is that you need a coherent and convincing vision. You want to sell your work. What's unique about it and why is it important? As an ECR, I find collaboration very useful, because when I'm applying for money, I can make the case that, okay, I haven't been PI on a major grant, but you can trust me with this because I have a senior PI on the team who can mentor me, and get them to okay that statement in the case for support. You can also strengthen the team. More people, you can expand the knowledge base that's there. Just because it's obvious to you why this research should be funded, don't assume that. So if you have a technical solution, you might not want to go too deep in the details. You need to say what you're going to do, but you also need to explain why it's important, because you can't assume that anyone reading it it'll immediately be apparent to them that it is important. And sometimes it's better to show you're aware of the landscape rather than dwelling in too deep on details that reviewers are going to then pick up on. I think having your own recent papers in the area explaining why what you're doing would be a good thing to do is really useful. Proofread, it's always off-putting when you go to review a grant and you find that it's not well written. You can mimic that peer review process with colleagues as well. I know some universities are doing this now as standard, but if they're not, do it informally, offer to read someone else's grant and get them to read your proposal. It'll be worth it. When you apply for funding, the mechanism by which you're awarded funding is going to be different for every funding body. But I'll just briefly go through the process for the EPSRC for the EPSRC panels. So you'll submit your grant. It then goes to a number of reviewers. I think 4 is the standard. These reviewers should be experts in at least some aspect of your proposal. They'll review the proposal, and then you get a chance to respond to those review comments. This is really important, because when your proposal then goes to panel, the thing that they're going to look mostly at is the reviewer comments and your response to them. At the panel will consist of panel members, hopefully some with relevant experience to the proposals being considered. This is particularly true if it's a specific call. And your proposal will be assigned to 3 introducers. Now, they are to read the proposal, but their job is not to re-review. So they take on board the review comments and your response. The first introducer will then stand up in the panel and introduce your project and give a summary focusing on what the reviewers have said and the PI response. The second and third introducers will then say whether or not they agree with the first reviewer's comments broadly. So this is why in your PI response, it's quite important to make that self-contained, because they're not necessarily going to go, if you write something where you have to go back into the proposal to understand the comment that you've written, that's not that useful, because they might not do that. It then goes to the panel, and the panel will score all the proposals between 1 and 10. The scores might go up and down as different proposals are reviewed. And then it's just the top ranked proposals that get funding. Again, when you apply for funding, you're probably going to get rejected at some point. I don't think I know any successful PI who has not at least had some rejection. And if you look at overall, I think UKRI success rates are ballpark 25% for specific calls in the EPSRC. It might be down to 15 or it might be up to 40. Every successful PI will have had rejections. So trust me, when you get I wrote my first grant, I spent hours and hours and evenings doing it, and it was rejected, and I felt utterly disheartened. But that's what's going to happen at some point. So take on board that feedback, pick yourself up, and try and improve it. So you can't just resubmit the same proposal. So you got to be aware of that. And you should also be aware that this can't just be a numbers game. So if you might say to yourself, well, if they fund 25% of proposals, I'll put 10 in and I'll get 1 to 2 funded. That doesn't work. There is this repeatedly unsuccessful applicants policy, which you need to be aware of. So you've had your proposal rejected, but you think it's a good idea. If the idea is good, keep developing it. Don't lose heart. Expand that evidence base that says why that proposal is good. So write those papers and make your argument stronger. You can also look for other sources of funding. You might find that one of the reasons, if you got feedback and they say that the PI is not experienced enough, then you might want to expand your network on the proposal. So you might want to bring other people on board and make it more collaborative. I think this is also really useful because it'll change the proposal. So even if you're recycling bits of it, or you're applying to do broadly the same thing with, say, a stronger base of evidence and with other people on board, that's a different proposal that can then go in. If you can do preliminary studies to show why you should be doing this research, do those. You might not have as much funding as you would like to do it, but do them as best you can and build that evidence base. Stay ambitious. I think volunteering for internal peer review is a really useful thing to do, because you can then look at other people's proposals. You might find that there is, some kind of recipe to success that you identify, and you can apply that in your own proposals. I think related to the sort of proofreading, apply when you're ready to apply. So if your proposal is really rushed, it's probably not going to read well and get funded. So make sure, allocate the time in your diary beforehand, or delay the submission. Because remember, you can't submit that exact same proposal again. When you're recommending reviewers, recommend reviewers who you think are going to be tough, but also fair. And I promise that finally you will get lucky. So on that note, I will end. Thanks.
Come back to question and answer session. So let's welcome our next speaker, Dr. Angeliki. She works with National Grid, and I welcome for the talk.
Can you hear me well?
Just a minute. Yeah. Yeah, we can see you.
Yeah, you cannot hear me? So you need, if you can hear me, you need to stop sharing so that I can start sharing. Okay, good. Can you see my screen now? I cannot hear you. You are muted, so I cannot hear you.
Okay, we can see you as well as see your slides well. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. Yes, hello everyone. Let me see if I can. Okay, it will go away eventually. Yeah, hopefully you can see my screen. Thank you for the opportunity to be around today. I am Angeliki Lukatu. I work, until recently I was working in EDF Energy at the R&D department, but I just joined National Grid the week before. So about this presentation, I will talk about the transition from academia to industry. So I was doing a PhD myself. One moment. Okay, I was wondering how I can get rid of this bar, but okay, it's okay, don't worry. Yes, so I will talk about the transition, but I will also focus a lot on the PhD life and the different challenges that we encounter when we are in the academic world, primarily when we are at the PhD level. And then I will also give some general advice, and I will discuss some opportunities and challenges when we move into industry. So, yeah, a few things about myself. So I graduated as a power system engineer from the National Technical University of Athens. There I specialized in pumped hydro storage. So I started my career in energy storage very early. After that, I stepped into UK, into the School of Mathematics at the University of Manchester, and I was doing my PhD in battery storage collocated with wind farms. So I was examining how basically we can use batteries when we put them close to wind farms so that we can build successful business models and revenue streams. Finishing my PhD, I joined Energy Systems Catapult as a modeling analyst. There I continued my journey to energy storage. So I was working into second life batteries for microgrids, but also into the bulk energy storage that could connect to transmission level. Then after that, I joined EDF as a lead research engineer, and I was working primarily on designing the algorithms behind trading and investment valuations, again, for energy storage. So there is a pattern here. And as I said, I joined last week National Grid as an energy insight lead, and I will be working and leading the storage and flexibility activities. Okay, so firstly, as I said, I will tackle opportunities and challenges in academia. So a lot of times when I am in industry, I am being asked, so if I would go back in time, if I would do my PhD, if that makes sense. So my answer is always yes. So the PhD for me will always remain one of the biggest achievements that I have made in this life. But of course, if you are just about to step into that process, you need to understand why you want to do it. So again, a lot of your plans that are going to change within day, within week, within month, but it is nice to have a long-term plan and see, for example, yourself as a lecturer, or you want to do it because there is a particular piece of research that it is of your interest. So it is important to understand your why, so the reasoning behind, and also accept that it will be challenging. So I think most of people, they would agree that doing a PhD has a lot of challenges, especially the first years, but strictly speaking, each year of the PhD has different challenges. So try to build your network, build the knowledge, and try to find hedging strategies. And with that, I mean, as I will elaborate later, try to see what else you can do apart from the PhD when you are at the PhD world. So yeah, uncertainty. Especially in the first year of the PhD, you are gonna read a lot and you're gonna have to navigate through uncertainty, but that is not bad. You're gonna be probably a bit confused, a bit foggy, but you are gonna definitely get there. And out of this uncertainty, you can become very flexible and adaptive to change. And that is a very useful skill for your later on career. So I have this motto that things are scary until they are done. So the beginning is going to be more scary, but then you're going to start to iterate, and with every iteration, you're going to learn. Another thing that we have most of the times is insecurity. So at least myself, I have a lot. Is it enough? Do I have enough papers? He's smarter, she's smarter. But I think you have to focus on yourself. So focus on yourself, have the advice from your supervisor, have some advice from colleagues, and always compare yourself to the last version of you. So how did you go at year 1? How did you go at year 2? How are things at year 3? Do you need to extend at year 4? So work in a sense with yourself, for yourself, and also be realistic. You know, you can achieve anything you want, but not everything. So you have to draw some barriers there and be realistic on what can be achieved. Yeah, that is also another challenge that you have as PhD student. So a lot of new information, especially in year 1, you read, you need to, sometimes you enter a project and it is very well defined, very narrow. Sometimes you enter in this research area that you need to make it a topic. So again, seek advice, the sooner the better, from your supervisor and colleagues. It's okay if you have to shift direction. It happened to me as well. So I needed after year 1 to shift a bit the direction of my project. But then you need to, again, to prioritize. And from all of that information, it is an amazing skill that you're going to deliver, that you are going to cherry pick whatever is useful for you later on. Because honestly, every day we are bombarded from new information and new knowledge. So you're going to be very good at prioritizing and see what is important, what not, what is relevant, what not, what is recent, what not. I have heard this even at an interview stage, that after graduating, if I want to go in industry, I may be too academic. Now, when they asked me that, I really questioned them at the interview stage, and I was like, what does it really mean? Do you mean like complex methods? Because yes, a lot of people, they may believe that, but honestly, when you are an academic, you have developed such amount of different skills. So as I say here, you are responsible for your work. You definitely can organize a workload. You can select and cherry pick which data you want. You can go and set up a lab experiment. You can communicate and disseminate your knowledge to public. You can write grants and raise money. You have presentation skills. Only writing a thesis or a paper, it requires strong time management. And most importantly, you have problem solving. So basically you take a mega problem and you are supposed to come up with some answers and recommendations at either year 3 or year 4 if you ask the extension. And also you have teaching as well. So that was said by Ed as well before. It is very important. So I truly believe that one teaches, but both ways we learn, because we have to challenge ourselves to deliver these complex principles in very diligent and simple ways so that the knowledge can be shared. Yes, okay. In my PhD, when I first especially started, I was alone in the UK. I had just stepped out from Greece to the UK. I felt a bit lonely, but that went away very quickly. So again, in everything, in every drawback, you can see an opportunity. So definitely you have colleagues and supervisors and roommates and partners and family and friends that you can talk about. Maybe you cannot talk about all the technicalities, but definitely they may have been at a situation that they can advise you into a relevant problem. When you talk, sometimes the other person just listens. And as you talk, you get it out of your head. You may see it in a piece of paper. You may say to the other person, and you organize how you think. Sometimes think as not as big as they seem to be in our minds trapped. So my best advice here is talk. There are definitely research webinars that they are organized with your research group. So you release a lot of that burden and it feels better. So in the beginning, it took me a lot. So I mean, you was the guy that was sitting close to me, and it took me so long to say something more than hi in the morning, bye in the afternoon. But when we started interacting properly, year 2 was very well because it was a load that was shared. And I was also involving a lot myself in volunteering. So there is a lot of volunteering opportunities that you can do. And that is, again, building the set of soft skills that are going to be useful for industry. You can attend coding and data meetups. You can also exercise. So a lot of times we're 24/7 at the PhD, and we forget that it is important, as it was said before as well, to keep, that sanity, to keep that work-life balance that really matters. So yeah, here I have a lot of the volunteering that I have been doing during my PhD. So we had organized conferences about power systems, about energy storage, distinguished lecturers, women engineering talks. So all of these things, they really boosted my PhD. And my only advice here would be that volunteering is a serious commitment. So if you decide to say yes, it's not optional anymore. You took some responsibilities, you have to deliver it. And I said that before. So how you do anything is how you do everything. So be responsible. And trust me, it is very rewarding. You are going to build a lot of different soft skills apart from software and apart from research. So you're going to lead teams, you're going to need to raise money, not massive millions, but still the core principles, they stay the same. So you're going to have to communicate with the audience, as I said, to lead a team, interact with the industry, build your network, interact with your other colleagues. And again, it is organized by students for students, and by that I mean postgraduate researchers. So it is very, very valuable. That is the other thing that I touched for my PhD. So I was very active in attending coding and data meetups. There are a lot of them, honestly, around UK, in Manchester, in Birmingham, in Warwick, in London. Every time that I go to a new city, and I have been to a lot of them already, as Ed said, you have to be willing to move so that the opportunities are there. So basically, there are a lot of those that you can participate in hackathons, you can have trainings, you can find a mentor. That is very important. You can find a mentor within university and outside university. And basically, you can also find role models. So you cannot be what you cannot see. So, you see that women, they can be like less scared and thrive in the area, and you are exposed to a wealth of knowledge that is out there. People they are really generous with their time of sharing knowledge. Okay, so you have done all of that. Again, to sum up, I think the best advice that I can give you is that even if it feels lonely, scary, you can definitely do it, and you can find all of the other extra things that they can build your soft skills that are required in industry later on. When you transition now from academia to industry, a piece of advice from me would be to take a break. If you can, take a break. I have always been Friday I stop one thing, Monday I start the other. And I yet have to take a proper break in between all of the different positions that I have taken so far, because that transition takes time. So you have to, especially when you step for the first time out of the PhD, you have to probably, as it was for me, maybe you haven't passed your Viva yet. So then you have to go back. At some point, you have to remind yourself, what was my thesis about? So you need to, while have started working in industry, so you need to go back and you need basically to do the Viva, to do some either minor, hopefully minor corrections. And then at your new role, you have to familiarize with new knowledge, with colleagues. And at some point, you need to start practicing again the new ways that you can achieve work-life balance, because every time that you start something new, that is a bit oscillating. So you need to re-establish it. So from my perspective, that is just a bottle that my colleagues at Catapult, they were very kind to give me when I graduated, and I passed my Viva. So the differences that I see, for me, so definitely you gain a lot. So the knowledge in industry is honestly a lot. Different backgrounds, different experiences, you interact with people. Sometimes stepping out of the PhD, if you haven't been involved, as I was in volunteering, meetups, all of these organizations, it may be a bit shocking, especially if you join an organization with thousands of people. It may be a shocking a bit to establish that relationship and that balance again. Pace is something different, I think. So it goes very quickly. So I have noticed that the projects that are of shorter duration, but they go very quickly. And the tasks, they keep changing all of the time. And most importantly, and I think that is probably different to academia, they are not necessarily defined by you. So you are going to have your manager, they may say to you, you have to do A, B, and C. If you probably are more junior, you may not have a lot of say in defining this A, B, and C. So maybe you have to have an approach of doing these things, but not necessarily drive the decision-making from the very early stages. But you don't have to do it alone, because sometimes we step out of academia and we're like, oh my God, do I have to be in a lonely environment? No, as I said, people that are very willing and generous with the time to help. So yeah, I think you should benefit from that experience and all of that exposure to that new environment. Yeah, it is not an ideal world as well. So as I said, my best piece of advice is, as long as you learn, keep going. So when you see that at your current role, you stopped learning, I would question it a bit, because knowledge is key, especially as we go towards a net zero world. So far, I haven't felt discriminated, or I haven't felt stressful to be a female engineer in industry. But I have heard other stories that there may be slightly different. Senior people, they are also as stressed as we are. So at different stages of your career, stress is always there, but you have different coping mechanisms as well. And I think another piece of advice from me is that you have to balance yourself when you are at work, because stressful things are going to happen, but also when you are outside of your work. So you need to know that, I mean, if I had a very stressful day or to meet a very critical deadline, I will do this and I will be fine. So if you get really tired, learn how you can rest, but not quit, if that makes sense. And I always have, and I adopt a whole system approach for myself. So again, it is not only about, maybe for some people it is, like being a technical expert, period. For me, it is not. So it is about being a technical expert, build your research, build the network, and always keep improving, keep interacting. For me, interaction is amazing. And I have been Also, like at Catapult, we are still in touch with people. In EDF, we are still in touch. I support people, I mentor people. I really find it very rewarding when you give knowledge, when you give time and you interact with people. Yeah, as I said here, volunteering, meetups, and for me, the thing that can bring me back into balance is yoga. So I found that during my PhD, and I have kept it since then for a lot of different reasons. Gratitude, so I feel that I can gain control back. I am more patient. I control where my energy goes. And again, I fight perfectionism and I fall in love with progress. So that is very important. No one is perfect. Everyone is scared. Just keep going, keep learning, keep adjusting, and keep getting to action. I have here something about charter engineering as well, because I believe that may not be very relevant when you are at the PhD level, because maybe you don't have all of the skills yet, although, as I said, you build a lot of skills. But I think it is very important that you start examining the charter engineering qualification when you are in industry. There are some roles, especially senior roles, as for example, National Grid, that they truly appreciate if you're a charter engineer, apart from having a PhD. So if you're about that route, and I could honestly give a separate talk only at that subject, the best advice that I can give you is to find a mentor. That's what I did myself so January 2022, not that far away. So January 2022. Yes, I found a mentor. I said, look, this is my CV. Do you believe that I have the skills? I can meet the competencies, or do I need to build something else? They said that you have the skills currently. You can start preparing your application. We had 3 or 4 iterations of my application. That, to give you an estimation, is about 10 to 12 pages, where you describe, for example, after you have read very carefully the UK specifications, how you can raise money, how you have managed teams, how you have working experience, how you have done volunteering, how you have written papers, how you have gained grants. So all of that thing, all of the different competencies, and there are, if I'm not mistaken, 18 there. So there are in 5 categories that are split. So you need to meet each one of them with at least one example. And there is the career manager online that you can go and you can start drafting some examples of what you have done and how that fits against each competency. If you want any advice on charter engineering, please, you're going to have my details afterwards. I am happy to give you any advice that you want. As I said, it is a skill that you should consider if you are in industry. And the last thing for me, yeah, as I said, for me, it is a lot about learning. You learn a lot and you plan. You deal with problem solving. You are very self-driven. It doesn't matter if you are in industry or academia. You need to have this. So the praise and the drive, they have to firstly come from within. And then that is the sophisticated quotes algorithm of my life. So I have long-term plans, but we all know that these change. So I try to take it day by day. I wake up in the morning and I go to bed in the night. I know that. So in between, what I try to do is I try to learn, as I said, take a lot of information, as I said, cherry pick critically, a skill that you build through your PhD very well, treat people well and respect them. I am very, very strict about that. Respect for me is everything. And apart from sharing knowledge and everything, how you treat people, for me personally, matters a lot. Be modest and honest. Honestly, there is no point why you should believe that you are superior than someone else. So you should be modest and, most importantly, enjoy. Whatever you do, even if you're in industry, in academia, you have to enjoy. And every now and then you have or at least I have my short-term plan. Every now and then I reflect on my personal progress. So I have industrial diaries where every 3 months I reflect how I performed, and then is my why still aligned with what I do every day? And then because strictly speaking, my time and other people's time is precious. We cannot generate more or less time, but we can pay attention to people, not make them repeat themselves, save time from people. So it is important that we respect people's time and needs. And the last thing is, I have here 3 books that I would, again, my recommendations. So Against the Gods is the book that has to do with risk and how the risk through different sectors, engineering, finance, medicine, has evolved over the time of the years, from the moment that it was just assigned something by God, to the moment that it was given probabilities and proper formulation on how we define risk. No Hard Feelings is an amazing book. So one of my mentors back in time recommended that to me, and it has to do with the different emotions that we have at work and how we cope with them. And then The Art of Readable Code is a bit more technical, so it is recommendation about how you can write code and document in more proper ways. And I want to leave you with this quote that I really like, that a lot of things with the first sight, they're gonna look very hard, but try to look again. Always, always look again. So I think that is from me, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Angeliki. So from here, we will start question and answer session. And I will start. If any of our colleagues here have certain questions, I would request you to come forward and introduce yourself in brief, and then go with your question. And you can come here so that you can meet your colleagues online as well. So any question from audience for both the speakers or in general about, yes, please.
Hello, everyone online. Yeah, I'm Chris from the University of Birmingham. So a question for Ed. You mentioned about maybe sometimes it wasn't worthwhile getting feedback, or was that perhaps more that the responses weren't worthwhile the chase of getting the feedback, or is that a case of sometimes you can get feedback that you don't want to hear and it's better not to actually receive that information?
So I think what I meant by that is so I don't think that you should ever be afraid of feedback that you don't want to hear. But I think the frustrating type of feedback is the feedback that doesn't help you. It doesn't tell you anything. And I think that if you've gone into, if you're just in the pile where you've not made the cut at the first hurdle, you're unlikely to get useful feedback from that. So it's not worth your time, and it's frustrating to get it. That's what I meant by that.
So would you seek the feedback if you get to the interview stage, or perhaps not if you don't even get that far?
Yes, and if you get to the interview stage, I think it's reasonable to ask for feedback. Before that, if you don't make it that far, but you've talked to someone in the department and you've talked to them about the position and you've asked, do you think that I would be a good fit with this position? And you've got that informal conversation started and you're getting feedback and they've given you some advice on it, then asking them is a very good thing to do. So someone with the internal ear might then be able to say, we had several postdoc applications who had significantly more papers, and therefore we didn't consider this one. That's just one reason. But then you can then go away and think, okay, well, I need to go and improve get another high quality publication, that kind of thing.
Thank you. Any other question from audience? I will also encourage our online participants if they have any questions. So meantime, I will try to ask one question, Angeliki, to you, that as you were mentioning that, yes, life is different in academia when you were doing PhD and now when you are working in industry. Just for all of us, can you elaborate on how your routine in the industry is different, like how your routine looks like in industry, what kind of activities you are involved in, and how it is different from your previous academic experience?
Yes, okay, of course. Thank you for your question. When I was doing my PhD and a bit after that, I was, as I said, I was trying to have a kind of a balance. That doesn't mean that I was not working every weekend, for example, but yes, there were weekends that I was trying 2 weekends off the month, not to work, so that I can ensure that I can always rest properly. Some others, especially towards the later years that I also had the writing, I will be honest, it was a bit more like the load was a bit more heavy, especially towards the writing process. So here in industry, I will be honest, so far, I don't work in weekends. So it has happened every now and then, but it is not the case that every weekend full hours, so 8-9 hours per day, Saturday, and 8-9 hours per Sunday, it is the same. Also, because I have a lot of volunteering activities, so in the IEEE PES Women Power, I am the chair, and then in SIGRE Women's Network, I am the project manager. So I have made some agreements with my employer that instead of having early mornings, late evenings, weekends for those activities, every Friday, I can take 1-2 hours every now and then and allocate to these activities. So I would argue I feel more balanced, if that makes sense. But that is not, you know, I think the difference is that it has ups and downs. It has ups and downs. But yeah, strictly speaking, I am Monday to Friday, and I am on average 9 hours per day. Yeah.
Thank you, Angeliki, for giving us that perspective. So, is there any question? Yes, please. Can you please come forward so that our online?
I don't have a question, just a request to Edward. So I don't have a clear question rather than a request. I would ask, thank you for his lecture. I think he covered everything from undergrad to be a vice chancellor. So we hope get yes. Just a request if you could share that slides. I can see you put many information in these slides. I think really helpful for research career. Anyone looking for promotion or go to research academy side. Thank you very much again for me.
So another question maybe for both our speakers while our other audience members are thinking about more questions is like while you were doing PhD as well as now probably in for Edward in your career as an academic in. So how do you plan your writing activities? Let's say if you start for with an idea for publication and how you go about doing it. For it may be very useful for PhD students as well as for in the sense early career researchers to know about that process of writing, because many times when you try to participate in different activities, you miss on having the focused writing lineup. So can you both elaborate on that? Maybe Angelique, you want to start?
Yes, I can start. Yes. My writing has been different. So when I was doing my PhD, writing was mostly about papers and the thesis. When I was in Catapult, it was writing proposals to get projects, money to get money for projects. When I was in EDF, same thing. And here, I don't have in a national grid to write. I have to write the future end scenarios. So I have to the decarbonization pathways to 2050. The way that I do it is I block time at my calendar. So like I have a meeting with myself, because honestly, the calendar can become busy like that. So I book time. I like, personally speaking, to do it first thing in the morning, because I have like fresh mind and I can write, and then editing can go later. I have this terminology that I call, so I close digital from around, and I call the first one, the apologies for the expression, the vomit draft. Okay, so that means that I write. It doesn't matter, like not a lot of editing. I write, and then after some point there is going to be a lot of edit and proofread. But first thing in the morning is the best that works for me, and booking slots in my calendar.
I would just really echo what Angelique says. I find it useful if I need to get something done, block your calendar, because other stuff will come in and try its best to derail you. Going back to when I was a PhD student, I do think being a PhD student is a unique experience from anything. So even though I'm an academic and I don't necessarily leave my work at the office, it's nothing like being a PhD student. Being a PhD student is a completely different experience. And when I was a PhD student, reflecting back on that, my best advice is possibly ride the waves. So when things are going well in the PhD and you're enthusiastic about it and you're writing and you feel productive, use those times. Because as Angelique said, there are downs in the PhD. There are bits where you feel bogged down. You can't think through a problem. So when things are going well in the PhD, I think those are your writing times. Get things down on paper. I would probably advise that, don't be afraid of staying late if you can during those times where it's going well, because the PhD is quite a unique experience.
Thank you. Any other question from our audience online or even colleagues here? So probably we are towards end of this session, and I would like to thank everyone for attending through online medium as well as friends here. So once again, I will thank you all from Supergen Energy Storage Network. I'm Amrita. I'm Cross Network Engagement Lead in Supergen Energy Storage Network. So from 12 noon onwards, we will be having lunch outside. So I invite you all to join us for lunch, and probably for Angelique and our other colleagues joining online. I hope you enjoy your lunch back at home.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me. Have a nice day.
Yeah, thank you both.
Thank you.